They didn't just tow my car, they set me up. The fine, the fake signs, even the security guard were part of it. At first, I thought it was just another greedy towing company looking for quick cash. But the deeper I looked, the more it felt like a game, one I was never supposed to win. If you enjoy stories where karma hits back harder than anyone expects, make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss how this one unfolds. It started on a Thursday night. I'd just gotten home from a late shift at the hospital and exhausted, running on fumes, and parked right where I always did. The resident parking only sign hung crooked, half covered in tape, but it was my assigned spot. I'd paid for it. I even had the sticker on my windshield. Everything looked fine until it wasn't. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a strange metallic clanking sound. At first, I thought it was a trash truck, but when I looked out the window, I saw flashing yellow lights and my car being lifted by a tow truck. I bolted outside barefoot, yelling that it was my vehicle. The driver didn't even look at me. He just grinned and said, "Call the dispatcher." The dispatcher's tone was smug, almost rehearsed. "Sir, it's in violation of property rules. You'll have to pay a release fee, cash only." "Violation?" I said, still trying to understand. "I'm a resident. That's my assigned spot." He chuckled. "Then you should have read the fine print. Rules change every month. Want your car tonight? That'll be $475. Cash." I swear, I felt my pulse in my teeth. It wasn't even about the money at that point. Well, I guess it was the smirk in his voice. The quiet confidence of someone who's done this too many times and knows no one fights back. And maybe that's true for most people, but I'm not most people. The next morning, I went down to the impound lot. My car was sitting there behind a chain link fence, dusty and scratched. A handwritten sign on the office door said, "No refunds, no checks, no complaints." Inside, a woman with dead eyes slid a carbon copy receipt under the glass. No company name, no signature, no city permit listed, just an address that didn't exist when I looked it up later. That's when something inside me clicked. This wasn't just some sloppy business, and it was organized theft, wrapped in paperwork and fake professionalism. I took photos of everything, the receipts, the signs, the truck numbers. Then I went home, logged every detail, and started digging. City records, towing permits, property ownership, whatever I could find. And that's when I saw the first red flag. The towing company's business license had expired 8 months ago. The renewal application was denied, yet they were still operating, still towing, and somehow still listed as an authorized contractor for our apartment complex. I called the management office, thinking it had to be a mistake. The property manager, a slick guy named Alan, said he'd look into it. But his tone? Way too casual, like he already knew. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on, so I walked around the lot, checking every sign. Most of them looked identical, but then I noticed something. The bottom corner of each sign had a serial number sticker. And when I searched those numbers online, they didn't exist in the city database. Fake signs, fake permits, real money. And I had a feeling that my tow wasn't an accident. It was a setup, one they'd been running for months. So I made a decision right there, standing under that flickering streetlight. I was going to find out how deep this went. And when I did, they'd regret ever touching my car. The next day, I started my own investigation, quietly. No yelling, no threats, just focus. I knew if I went at them head on, they'd cover their tracks. So I played dumb. I paid the release fee in cash, took my keys, and walked away, pretending I'd given up. But I hadn't. I waited across the street in my car for the next tow. It didn't take long. 40 minutes later, another tow truck pulled in. Same company, same driver. Only this time, he didn't hook up a car illegally parked. He went straight for one with a guest permit still hanging on the mirror. That's when it hit me. They weren't following rules, they were hunting. Targeting vehicles that looked like easy money. New tires, clean paint, out-of-state plates. It was a system. I started documenting everything. I used my dash cam and an old GoPro to record the tow truck's routes, times, and license plates. Within 3 nights, I had enough footage to show a pattern. Same truck, same driver, same stretch of parking lots, always after midnight. When I showed the clips to a few neighbors, they were furious. One woman said her car was towed from a handicapped space, even though she had the placard. Another said her husband's work truck got taken twice in 1 week. No warnings, no tickets, just gone. That night, I checked the property's website. Buried in the lease fine print was a clause about towing enforcement partners. The company name listed there wasn't even the same one printed on my receipt. So I ran a search. And that's when I found it. The towing company had changed its name 3 times in the last 2 years. Same address, same owner, new logo every few months. It was like they were running from something or hiding in plain sight. The more I read, the more it made sense. Every time they racked up complaints or city violations, they'd shut down and reopen under a slightly different name. Fresh start, clean record. It was legal but dirty. I printed every document, every complaint I could find. Over 60 of them, all telling the same story. Cars towed without cause, no receipts, fake signs, missing permits. I wasn't the first victim. I was just the first one who started fighting back. But what really made my blood run cold was a comment I found buried in a review thread. Someone wrote, "The property manager gets a cut for every tow." At first, I thought it was just an angry tenant talking nonsense. But then I remembered Alan and the smug manager who brushed me off. He'd sounded too calm, too confident. The next morning, I tested my theory. I parked my car exactly where it had been towed. Same spot, same conditions. Then I placed a small sticker on the bottom of the resident parking only sign. A mark. If someone touched that sign again, I'd know. That night, I watched from my window. At 2:47 a.m., a flashlight beam danced across the pavement. Someone was there and checking plates. I zoomed in on the camera feed and saw the security guard, the same guy who always waved at me during the day. Only this time he was talking to the tow truck driver. They shook hands. And then, right before the truck rolled out, I saw the guard pull a phone from his pocket and make a call. The next morning, I checked my voicemail. A new message from the dispatcher. "Hey man, just a reminder. Watch where you park. We don't want to tow you again." He was taunting me. They knew exactly what they were doing. I sat there for a minute, gripping the phone, my jaw locked. That was the moment I stopped being angry and started getting strategic. They wanted to play games? I was about to change the rules. By the third day, I had enough proof to fill a folder. Photos, videos, time-stamped notes, even the audio from that smug dispatcher. Still, part of me wanted to believe it could be fixed the easy way. Maybe if I just showed them the facts, they'd back off. So I scheduled a meeting with Alan, the property manager. His office looked like it came straight from a brochure. Framed motivational posters, fake plants, and a bowl of peppermints on the desk. But behind that fake smile, I saw calculation. "Alan," I began, laying out the folder. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My car was towed illegally. I have proof, expired business license, fake signs, everything." He didn't even look at the papers. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, gave a polite laugh, and said, "You really went digging, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "And what I found doesn't look good. You're listed as the property contact on their contracts. Did you know the company you're using isn't even licensed?" He smirked. "Look, I don't handle that stuff. Corporate picks the vendors. We just enforce the rules." Rules. That word again. I opened my laptop, showing him the time-stamped video of the tow truck driver shaking hands with the security guard. "This isn't enforcement, Alan. This is collusion." The smile slipped for half a second, then came back stronger. "Be careful with accusations like that," he said quietly. "You could get yourself into trouble. We wouldn't want to make the situation worse." The air went cold. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly, but it was close enough. I gathered my papers slowly, keeping my tone calm. So you're saying you're fine with illegal tows on your property? I'm saying, he replied, if you think you can fight city contracts and corporate lawyers, be my guest. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. But as soon as I reached the parking lot, I noticed something new. A bright yellow warning sticker on my windshield. Unauthorized parking. Final notice. Final notice? My car hadn't even moved in days. That's when I realized this wasn't a coincidence. They were sending a message. That night, I checked my mailbox. Inside was an envelope. No stamp, no name. Just my apartment number written in marker. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Stop asking questions. No threats, no details. Just that. And that's when all the doubt disappeared. These people weren't careless. They were connected. I didn't just stumble into a shady towing company. I'd walked into a system built on kickbacks, fake paperwork, and intimidation. I took the note, scanned it, and saved it to the growing folder I'd started labeling proof of scheme. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. They thought I'd back down like everyone else, but all they'd done was prove how much they had to lose. After that message, I stopped trying to talk to anyone. Words weren't going to fix this. Information would. So I started digging for real. The next morning, I took a personal day from work, drove downtown, and spent 6 hours in the city records office. It's amazing what you can find if you ask the right way, and if you sound like you already know what you're looking for. I requested copies of towing permits, business registrations, and any city complaints linked to our complex. The clerk gave me a look like she'd seen this movie before. Another one of those? She asked quietly. Another what? I said. Those towing companies that keep changing names. They always come back. Same trucks, same guys, just new paperwork. That was all I needed to hear. I took the stack of documents, found a quiet corner, and started connecting the dots. Every company name led to the same owner, a man named Richard Cole, listed on 3 different LLCs, all registered to the same P.O. box. Each one dissolved right after racking up fines for illegal towing, and then magically reappeared under a new name within a month. But that wasn't the real kicker. The addresses they used as storage lots? 2 didn't exist. One was an abandoned warehouse that had been condemned 5 years earlier. They weren't just cutting corners, they were ghosts on paper. I kept going, pulling records until my phone battery died. City contracts, maintenance bids, insurance claims. And that's when the property management company's name appeared again. Evercrest Holdings. The same company Alan worked for. There it was in black and white. Evercrest paid enforcement fees to the towing contractor every quarter. Thousands of dollars labeled as parking compliance services. No breakdown, no invoice numbers, no verification. It looked official until you realized what it really meant. They weren't getting paid by the towing company. They were paying to it. In return, the company made money off every tow, and the property got a kickback for letting it happen. That's when I started noticing the smaller details I'd missed before. The signs around the lot, printed with the same misspelling of unauthorized. The phone number listed for the tow hotline, 1 digit different from the real city impound. A copycat number that redirected straight to their dispatcher. It was a perfect scam. Fake compliance, fake documents, real profit. I drove by one of their listed storage lots that evening, the one still active according to the paperwork. The gate was half rusted, no lights, no security cameras. Inside, maybe 4 cars sat on flat tires, covered in dust. That's when it hit me. The cars weren't being stored. They were being flipped. Every record I'd seen listed cars sold to recover costs within days of being towed. If you didn't pay cash immediately, your vehicle disappeared. Legally sold to cover fees. They'd built a system designed to look legitimate, just enough paperwork to scare off anyone who asked questions. I sat there in my car watching the dark yard through the fence. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from fury. These people had turned theft into policy. And the best part? The city didn't even know. That night, I'd laid everything out on my kitchen table: papers, photos, addresses, company names. It looked like a conspiracy board from a detective show. Lines connecting the property company, the towing firm, the security guard, even Alan's personal contact info. For the first time, I saw the full picture. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. And now that I understood the rhythm, I could finally plan my next move. I knew I couldn't beat them with emotion. They had lawyers, money, and years of practice in manipulation. But I had something they didn't: patience. And the truth, printed in black and white. I spent the next few nights going through every local and state regulation on towing operations. It felt like decoding a foreign language. Sections, clauses, and footnotes buried in endless PDFs. But eventually I found what I was looking for: a loophole. To operate legally, a towing company needed an active bond with the city, proof they could compensate drivers in case of damage or unlawful towing. The bond had to be renewed every fiscal year and listed under the same business license. Guess whose bond had expired 8 months ago? Richard Cole's company. That meant every single tow they'd done since then was technically illegal. Each one could be challenged, refunded, and penalized. I gathered every instance I could find: plate numbers, complaint IDs, property names, over 40 cases. And all of them led back to the same address, the same trucks, and the same smug dispatcher who once told me to read the fine print. But I wasn't ready to go public yet. I needed something stronger, something they couldn't explain away as paperwork errors. So I went to the courthouse records archive and pulled copies of property permits. The security company contracted by Evercrest, the one employing that flashlight-loving guard, had filed its last license renewal under the same LLC that owned the towing company. They weren't separate entities at all. It was one man running both sides of the scam: the enforcers and the thieves. That was the thread I needed. I scanned every document, backed it up in 3 places, and reached out to a lawyer friend I trusted: Jamie, a real estate attorney with a sharp eye for fraud. I told him I wanted hypothetical advice, and we spent hours over coffee breaking down the pattern. Jamie leaned back, rubbing his temples. Technically, what they're doing looks legitimate on the surface. But if you can prove coordination between property management, the security company, and the tow operator, that's civil racketeering. It's serious. I smiled for the first time in days. Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Over the next week, I filed a public records request for all city towing complaints tied to their license numbers. It cost me $20 and 3 hours of waiting. But the file I got was gold. Dozens of reports. Residents claiming their cars were taken without notice. The same names popping up again and again. And then I found one report that chilled me. It wasn't just about towed cars. It mentioned property theft. Personal belongings missing after storage. A laptop, a toolbox, even a kid's car seat. They weren't just exploiting the system. They were taking advantage of people's lives. I forwarded everything to my lawyer friend, who confirmed what I suspected. If the city's licensing board saw this, they could suspend operations within days. But I didn't send it yet, because I realized something. If I exposed them too soon, they'd just shut down again, reopen under a new name, and keep going. No. I needed them to feel safe first, to believe I'd given up. Then, when they least expected it, I'd pull the floor out from under all of them. That night, I drafted a new plan, a quiet one. No police, no yelling, no warnings. Just the slow, deliberate sound of paperwork closing around their throats. It didn't take long for them to realize someone was digging. The first sign was small. The same tow truck parked across from my building 3 nights in a row, engine idling, lights off. Then came the phone calls. Unknown numbers. Silence on the other end. It wasn't enough to scare me, but it was enough to send a message. We see you. I started noticing more, my mailbox left open, a car following me for a few blocks after work, the security guard pretending not to recognize me when I passed the lobby. They were trying to push me off balance to make me paranoid, but instead of reacting, I leaned into it. If they wanted to think they were intimidating me, fine, I'd play along. I stopped collecting documents publicly, stopped asking questions around the complex. When I passed Alan in the hallway, I even gave him a polite nod, like we'd both agreed to forget the whole thing. That seemed to relax him, and while they were exhaling, I was tightening the net. I used a friend's address to register a small LLC under a generic name, Urban Recovery Solutions. It looked like a local maintenance service, nothing suspicious. But the purpose was simple. It let me communicate with businesses, sign small purchase contracts, and request financial data as a potential partner. Within a week, I had access to 2 invoices from the towing company. Both listed payments made by Evercrest Holdings. And one had something strange at the bottom, an internal memo code labeled Split 6040. I didn't know exactly what it meant yet, but I had a good idea. That same night, I got an unmarked envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single parking citation, the kind they printed when a car was scheduled for tow. Only this one had my name, my plate number, and the word flagged written in marker. It wasn't a warning, it was bait. I decided to let them think it worked. I called the dispatcher the next morning pretending to be shaken up. "Listen," I said, "I don't want any trouble. I'll stay out of it. Just stop towing my car." He gave a low laugh. "Smart choice, man. Some people just need to learn when to quit." And just like that, they thought I'd folded. What they didn't know was that my lawyer friend had already filed a quiet inquiry with the state attorney's office about their expired bond. It wasn't a formal complaint, just a question that would trigger an internal audit. I wasn't going to blow my cover by going loud. I wanted them calm, confident, and unprepared. Meanwhile, I started reaching out to people who'd left bad reviews about the company. I didn't ask for money or interviews, just facts. Copies of receipts, dates, anything they still had. One woman sent me a scanned invoice that matched the memo code I'd found earlier. Split 6040. It was the key. That code wasn't about the tow. It was about the payout. 60% to the towing company, 40% to the property management. Proof of profit sharing, proof of collusion. I stared at that document for a long time, realizing what it meant. This wasn't just fraud. It was organized corruption, hidden behind legal jargon and signed contracts. That night, as I walked past my car, I noticed the same tow truck parked down the street. The driver was inside, staring at his phone. He looked up as I passed, then smirked. I smiled back, because he had no idea I'd already won. Not today, not yet. But the pieces were moving. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was playing their game better than they ever had. And soon, they'd never see the next move coming. Every operation has a heartbeat, and if you listen closely enough, you can find where it stumbles. For Richard Cole, that heartbeat was money. Not the kind he earned, the kind he owed. After weeks of digging through court filings and public records, I found what I was looking for. A chain of lawsuits buried under corporate shells. The man was drowning in debt. Overdue property taxes, unpaid contractor bills, 2 pending claims from lenders who hadn't seen a payment in months. His empire looked solid from the outside, shiny trucks, fancy logo, an office in a business park. But behind the facade, it was collapsing. The more I read, the clearer it became. He wasn't running 3 companies for efficiency. He was doing it to stay one step ahead of bankruptcy. I knew that if I wanted to destroy his operation, I didn't need to confront him. I just needed to own him. On paper. So I started small. Through my dummy LLC, I reached out to one of the debt collection agencies listed in his court filings. I asked about a portfolio of delinquent accounts related to a transportation company. I didn't mention names, just descriptions. 2 days later, they sent me a file. There it was, a bundle of outstanding debts tied to one of his towing companies. Value $28,000. Price to buy the debt outright $3,200. It was legal, entirely clean. And once purchased, it would make me the creditor. I wired the money that afternoon, and just like that, I became part of his financial nightmare. Now, every time his company tried to move money between accounts or refinance assets, my claim showed up on the record. He couldn't sell a truck, transfer property, or apply for a loan without my name crossing his desk. At first, he didn't even notice, but a few weeks later, his lawyer called my LLC's office, a rented mailbox with an answering service. The message was polite but tense. Our client wishes to discuss settling the outstanding debt acquired by your company. That's when I knew I had his attention. I called back, posing as a mid-level investor. I spoke slowly, professionally. We're open to discussion, I said, but if your client can't pay, perhaps we can negotiate some kind of equity arrangement. Silence, then a cautious reply. You mean partnership? Something like that, I said. We met 2 days later at a neutral site, a diner off the highway. Richard. Cole looked exactly like I imagined. Expensive watch, cheap confidence. The kind of man who'd been in control too long to recognize when he wasn't anymore. He ordered coffee and spent 10 minutes bragging about how booming his business was, pretending the debt was a minor oversight. I let him talk. When I finally spoke, I slid a printed ledger across the table. You're upside down, Richard. You know it. I know it. But I'm not here to crush you. I'm here to help you breathe. He squinted. You some kind of debt vulture? I smiled. No, I'm a problem solver. And that was true, just not for him. Over the next week, we negotiated. I played patient, even friendly. The kind of investor who saves struggling companies. What he didn't realize was that every document he signed gave me more leverage. A lien here, a signature there, until the ownership web started shifting. By the time he realized what I was doing, it was too late. I didn't own the whole company, not yet, but I owned enough of his debt to control how he paid it. And if he defaulted again, which I knew he would, I'd have the right to seize assets. Tow trucks, contracts, licenses. Everything that once humiliated me would soon belong to me. And all he'd done was sign the papers himself. Richard thought I was there to save him. That was the beauty of it. He kept calling me partner, introducing me to his accountant as our new investor. And I played along, the calm, polite man with a quiet smile and a plan. He had no idea that every handshake, every signed paper, was another chain around his own business. Over the next few weeks, I injected small amounts of cash into his accounts, just enough to keep his trucks running and the employees paid. Each transfer went through my LLC, labeled as bridge funding. Every dollar came with a clause. Every clause came with control. Meanwhile, I started learning the internal structure of the company. The dispatcher, the drivers, even the night shift supervisors. Most of them weren't bad people. They were just stuck working for a man who treated them like disposable tools. I kept my conversations simple, respectful, curious, never demanding. I asked how things could run better, what they hated most about the job. They opened up faster than I expected. That's how I learned the real reason the company stayed afloat. It wasn't efficiency, it was fear. Richards docked pay for bad tows. He fined drivers for returning cars that couldn't be sold. He even forced them to work off the clock if they damaged property. Most of the staff hated him, but they needed their paychecks. So I gave them something better. Quietly, I set up a second bank account under the company's name. One Richard didn't know about. All legal, all documented. That's where I rerouted payroll. Drivers started receiving full payments, no deductions. The first week, no One said anything. By week 2, they were whispering. By week 3, the whispers turned to loyalty. They didn't know who was behind the change, but they knew it wasn't him. Around the same time, I had the office refurbished for auditing purposes. We installed new computers, updated software, and of course, added discrete security cameras. All with Richard's signature of approval. He didn't even read the forms. Those cameras became my goldmine. They captured everything. Late night cash exchanges, fake receipts being printed, phone calls with the property manager about weekly numbers. Every frame was another nail in the coffin. One night, I walked into the dispatch room unannounced. The dispatcher froze halfway through a call. "Relax," I said, smiling. "Just checking on operations." I watched as he hung up, trying to act casual. The monitor behind him displayed a list of vehicles approved for removal. And there it was again. Allen's property listed at the top. Same pattern, same kickback scheme. The pieces were finally complete. Richard had no idea that the man keeping his company alive was also documenting its every move. No idea that the drivers he mistreated were now loyal to someone else. And no idea that the cameras he'd approved were recording his downfall. The best part? He still thought I was his savior. Every time he shook my hand, thanked me for saving his business, I smiled back. Because I knew what was coming. I wasn't just going to expose him. I was going to make him watch his own empire collapse from the inside. And when the day came, he wouldn't even see it coming, until the locks changed and his name was gone from the door. The morning it all came together was quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind of silence before a storm. I'd been planning Day X for weeks, aligning every piece like a chess game. The paperwork, the recordings, the contracts, everything was ready. All it needed was timing. Richard showed up late that morning, wearing his usual smug grin. "Got some big pickups today," he said. "Allen's property just cleared 6 vehicles last night. Easy money." I smiled, calm as ever. "Perfect," I said. "We'll go over the numbers together this afternoon." He didn't know that by numbers, I meant evidence. At noon, I called a staff meeting, something I'd never done before. Every driver, dispatcher, and office worker showed up, curious and uneasy. Richard walked in last, adjusting his cufflinks like a king about to address his court. "All right, what's this about?" he said. I looked around the room, then hit play on my laptop. The projector flickered to life, showing time-stamped footage from the office cameras. Richard counting cash, falsifying receipts, laughing with Allen over speakerphone. His grin disappeared in seconds. "This is—" he started, but I raised a hand. "Don't," I said quietly. "You signed the consent forms yourself. For internal auditing, remember?" The next clip rolled. A recorded call between the dispatcher and Allen discussing the usual split. The entire room fell silent. One of the drivers, a guy named Chris, spoke first. "You've been stealing from us," he said. His voice shook, not with fear but rage. "We were risking our necks for this?" Richard turned pale. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do," I said. I stepped forward, sliding a thick folder onto the table. "Here are the contracts, the fake permits, and the proof of profit sharing between you and the property managers. I also sent copies to the city attorney and the licensing board. 30 minutes ago." He stared at me, disbelief hardening into panic. You set me up." "No," I said, steady. "You set yourself up. I just turned on the lights." The drivers looked from him to me, realizing who'd been behind the payroll changes, who'd actually treated them like human beings. "Wait," one of them said. "You're the reason we're getting paid right now, aren't you?" I nodded once. That's when it shifted. The staff began pulling off their ID badges one by one, tossing them onto the table in front of Richard. A quiet rebellion, but powerful. He turned to me, his voice cracking. "You think you can run this place without me?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." Then I pulled out the final document, The debt settlement agreement he'd signed weeks earlier. This, I said, makes me the controlling creditor, which means as of today, I own your assets. He lunged forward, grabbing the papers, scanning them like they might change under his eyes. This is fake. No, I said, meeting his gaze. This is legal. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then I picked up my phone and made one short call. Yeah, I said, we're ready. Two representatives from the city licensing office walked in moments later, accompanied by a sheriff's deputy. Not for arrests, for oversight. Legal seizure, not revenge. The deputy handed Richard a folded notice. Your business license is suspended pending investigation, he said. Richard's hands trembled. You can't do this. I didn't, I said, looking him straight in the eye. You did. He stormed out of the office, shouting, but no one followed. The room stayed still, heavy with the kind of silence that comes after truth finally lands. One of the drivers turned to me. So, what happens now? I exhaled slowly. Now we rebuild. Clean slate, honest work. Outside, the tow trucks sat in the sun. The same machines that once symbolized theft and fear. Now they looked different, like tools for something better. That was the day the empire fell. Not with sirens or headlines, but with signatures, proof, and the sound of justice clicking into place. It's strange how silence sounds different when it's peaceful. For months, that office had been a place of tension. Lies whispered through half-closed doors, fear hidden under fake smiles. Now it was quiet for the right reasons. The city finished their investigation faster than anyone expected. Between the fake permits, illegal profits, and tax violations, Richard's companies were finished. Allen lost his management license, and Evercrest Holdings was fined heavily for their oversight. But for me, that wasn't the victory. The real win came a few weeks later when I reopened the company under a new name, Clearway Towing and Recovery. No cash scams, no fake paperwork, just honest work. I rehired the drivers who wanted to stay, gave them fair pay, proper schedules, and benefits. I told them one rule: no one gets towed without proof. And for the first time, they smiled. The company changed fast. Word spread through the city. People noticed that the same trucks that once caused chaos were now actually helping. We started offering free roadside assistance to nurses, veterans, and single parents. Not as a PR move, but because I wanted to do something real with all the power I'd taken back. Sometimes I still see the look on Richard's face that day. Disbelief, anger, confusion. He couldn't understand how a man he tried to humiliate had outsmarted him without ever breaking a single law. That's what real revenge looks like. Calm, quiet, and final. One evening, months later, I parked outside my apartment. The same spot where it all started. The new sign stood tall, properly marked, fully legal. I sat in my truck, watching the lights reflect off the metal, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. All that time, all that effort, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about taking back control, about proving that the system could be beaten, not by breaking it, but by understanding it better than the people who abused it. Now, my life's simple, the business runs clean, the crew respects me, and when someone calls us for help, we actually show up. Funny thing, every now and then, I get messages from people who've gone through the same thing. Towed unfairly, ignored, mocked, and I tell them the same thing I learned the hard way. You don't have to fight dirty to win, you just have to fight smart. So that's how I turned a towing scam into a company that actually helps people. I lost sleep, money, and trust along the way, but I gained something much more important: peace. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? What would you have done in my place? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, hit like, and drop a comment below. I've got plenty more real-life revenge stories that'll make you rethink what justice really means.